What's happening, guys? We want to talk to you today about what you can expect in your CrossFit training at sort of any point in the timeline. So if you're watching this, you might have 2 weeks experience, you might have 2 years experience, so we're hoping to cover a very wide spectrum. So the starting point is clearly starting. So we're going to go from starting until the first year. So Andrew, what can you expect in your first year of CrossFit?
Major gains, so you get a lot stronger, lose some weight, get better anaerobic and aerobic endurance and stuff. Learning a lot of skills, but also maybe getting frustrated with those skills because there's a lot to take in. But learning a lot of learning, a lot of gains, pretty quick, and a lot of fun.
I would say usually between the 6-month and the 1 year mark is when you have that aha moment of like, okay, I get what's in front of me now, because it's kind of hard to understand, like, just what am I getting myself into on day one. But that 6-month to 1 year mark, you go, okay, I know what's in front of me. I understand what's at stake. Now I know what I didn't know, and I can practice the things that I'm weak at, and I can sort of do this with purpose as opposed to just showing up and being like, what are we doing today, coach? I don't really get it. So somewhere in that 6-month to 1 year mark, things start to really take shape, and you get it, so to speak.
Yeah, and CrossFit's unique in terms of like a mode of exercise in that, you know, at a gym you can go and you can look at the machine and figure out how to do it. You don't necessarily need to remember the name of the machine or anything like that. If you're a weightlifter, you typically squat and press and do clean and jerks and snatches. If you're a runner, you typically run varying distances. If you're a rower, you row, and if you're a gymnast, you do gymnastic stuff. CrossFit pulls from all of that. So there's a lot of terminology. There's a lot of skills that can be confused with one another. Obviously, there's great transfer from one skill to another. But CrossFit has a lot. It pulls from a very big pool. So there's just tons of learning. Learning for your body, but also learning as far as terminology and what the hang is and what a power jerk is compared to a strict press and all that stuff. So lots of learning.
Yeah, you may have heard me say it's quite literally like learning a brand new language. It takes practice. All right, year 1 through 3 is you kind of got your chops, and now you've got 2 years of sort of productive, trajectory-oriented training. So Andrew, what can you expect in years at the conclusion of year 1 through the conclusion of year 3?
I think these are probably the most fun years, and that the learning phase is still there, but now you're more refining stuff. And this is, I always like to say, for people who are struggling to get their pull-ups, or if they got their first pull-up, I always tell them, now you can start training your pull-ups. It's nice once you have a skill, or once you have the strength to do 1 or 2 reps of a new movement, now you can really start training that movement. So once you learned how to clean during that first year and you struggled with contact and your rack and all that stuff, now after the first year you probably know how to do it, and you can really start training your clean. You probably have your front squat pretty much on lockdown. So I think the gains are still pretty rapid here, because there's a lot more work and maybe a little less time talking and learning and stuff. But things maybe slow down a little bit as far as your gains are concerned, and you are doing a lot of refining and really developing these skills.
This is also, I think, a period of time where the bad habits that have sort of crept in along the way, because it's sort of inevitable as you train to sort of, things don't always go perfectly. And so, you know, you do things that may not be ultimately advantageous to you. So this is a period of time, I think, to really iron those things out. Again, you know what you didn't know. You know why a banded pull-up versus a strict pull-up versus a kipping pull-up are all different. And you can iron those things out so that you can take your 1 or 2 or 5 pull-ups to 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and you can take your 100-pound clean to a 200-pound clean, and all those things. You get to, as Andrew said, refine, and part of that refinement is ditching the bad, counterproductive stuff.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we probably should have said is that what happens in not so much in, well, what happens from 0 to 1 year and what happens from 1 to 3 years really depends on what happens before. So if you were productive and you were smart in your first year, then years 1 through 3, so the next 2 years, will probably be dramatically more productive. Yeah. If you came in off the street, I think you said that if you have no experience, but if you came in and you played sports in the past and you've run and you've done Olympic lifts and you've kind of dabbled in this stuff, but maybe not super in detail and super technique oriented, you'll probably accelerate a little bit faster in the first year. So these things really are, we're going to go into these longer time frames of year 3 to 5 and 5+, and those years are really going to depend on what you did for the first 3 years. Because if you're just developing bad habits over and over and adding fitness to dysfunction, that's no good.
Yeah, and there's sort of an important interjection right here as well, in that just because you have been doing something for a sustained duration of time doesn't mean that you necessarily graduate from that first step to the next one, or that you don't regress. So everything, theoretically is linear, but at some point, if you take a step back, your linear progress has changed, and that can change for all sorts of reasons. So anyway.
Listen to your coaches.
Listen. Years 3 to 5. So now you have learned about what you don't know. You can refine your stuff. You can iron out your form and your technique. You've been doing this for 3-4 years, something like that. So what do you expect now, Andrew?
Once again, I still think you can make dramatic gains, and they will come, but really dependent upon what you did for the first year, for the first 3 years, as far as developing good stuff and not bad stuff. I always say, or I don't say this, I stole this from, I think, Kelly Starrett, practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. You don't want to add dysfunction to fitness. You don't want to make yourself really fit in a very dysfunctional way in which you're putting yourself at risk for injury. So if you had a productive first 3 years, then I would expect things to continue to progress in a good way, but maybe slow down a little bit. This can be a time that's a little frustrating because maybe your back squat plateaus and you don't hit a PR for the next 2, 3, 4 years, something like that. That doesn't mean you should stop back squatting. Maybe change up your back squatting program that you're following, whether it be your volume or your intensity or your rest periods, whatever it is. This may be a good time to start tweaking stuff if you start to experience some plateaus and stuff. But this is definitely not a time to give up, and this is definitely not a time to think that you're never going to get any better or anything like that. It's just something you got to get through.
I would say this is also an interesting time in that, let's say through the first 3 years, you routinely and consistently go 3 days a week, and you put in your 3 hours of training, you put your whole ass into your 3 hours, 3 times a week, every week for 3 whole years. At some point, that will get you, the 250-pound deadlift or the 5 pull-ups or whatever it is that you're shooting for. But at some point, you have to add training to continue to rise up that curve. So you will never, for instance, get a 1,000-pound deadlift by just training deadlift once a week for the next 10 years or whatever it is. There is no amount of duration that will get you there. You have to add continually, and each addition that you add will get you marginal return on your gains, just like pretty much everything else in life. So if you're at 3 days a week and you've been here 3 years and you have hit a strict plateau, well, you have basically 2 choices. You can either be happy that you can maintain that and you just have to work out 3 hours a week and everything's great, or understand that if you want to continue to get better, you're going to have to add more stuff to it. So you have a choice at that sort of 3 to 4 year mark, and it could happen anywhere. It just usually happens kind of in that space. So 5 years plus. So Andrew, how long have you been doing CrossFit?
About 10 years.
And I've been doing CrossFit maybe 7, somewhere in that. This will be my 8th open, so at least that long. So once you were in that 5 plus 8 years, 10 years, and so on, what do you expect from your training, Andrew?
I think this I've probably said each time frame is the funnest time frame, but I think this is the funnest time frame because you know the skills and you can always go back to these skills. So even if you do take some time off, you can go back in and deadlift probably pretty well. You can go back in and clean and snatch and do bar muscle ups and all this stuff because you've learned these skills and you've got your bumps and bruises from developing these things. So you've kind of earned these skills and you can go back to them pretty easy. This is also a time where I think people may start to maybe bring down their training volume a little bit and like Eric mentioned, in a 3 to 5 year range, maybe kind of be happy with maintaining and not necessarily think that they need to hit that the maturity. You're getting mature with your training, so maybe you feel like, you know what, I'm kind of happy with what I'm doing, and I don't know, I'm starting a family or something like that, so I'm gonna be happy with the fact that I know these skills and I can go back to them whenever I want to, and I can maintain my fitness with maybe less time than I needed to because I'm more proficient at a lot of these movements. Once again, gains can still happen here, but you got to start adding in maybe not more creative, but these need to start adding in more accessory work and maybe things that you've missed out on for the past 5 years because you've been focused on CrossFit style training. And this may be a time to try out some machines. This may be a time to maybe tweak your Olympic lifts or something like that. So things get a little bit more technical here if you're just truly trying to still progress.
Yeah, my 2 cents on that is this is a very know thyself kind of period. So for instance, I know with 100% certainty I will never deadlift 500 pounds because I'm not spending any time on it. Now that perspective may change, but right now there is not a trajectory in mind. Whereas in year 6 months into this, I may have been like, oh my God, someday I'm going to deadlift 500 pounds. I know I'm not going to do that. And so you also will experience bumps and bruises along the way, and the grind of training, which is present no matter what you do with outside loads, powerlifting, weightlifting, whatever it is. The grind of training will speak to your body in a certain way. That elbow thing, that shoulder thing, and so you learn to take care of yourself. Otherwise, you just grind yourself down to a nub. You don't have anything left. So know thyself, learn what your limitations are, be happy with your training, and also taking care of your body, because the first 6 months of excitement, that enthusiasm and that intensity taken to 5, 6, 8, 10 years, it does have ultimately, it can be pretty hard on your body.
5+ year mark. This also could be a time in which you find one mode of fitness within CrossFit that you really kind of like, and maybe you want to kind of get into weightlifting or gymnastics, or you want to start running more or rowing, whatever it may be. Or maybe you're the double under champion of the world, something like that.
So hopefully a useful spectrum from day one all the way up until you have been doing CrossFit for 10 years, and so to speak, what you can expect along the way, and hopefully that's helpful in giving you some foresight and some future thought as to what you want your training to look like as the years go by. Thanks for watching, guys. See you next time.